Episode 14. This is the Inside Deschutes County podcast. It's available everywhere. Subscribe on any podcast platform, Apple, Google, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Listen, rate, and review, hopefully 5 stars. You can also find us on deschutes.org/podcast.
Deschutes County is an amazing place to live.
Ease of access.
Work and play.
Great place to raise a family.
I love the weather and the high desert.
At Deschutes County, we provide excellent service.
Beautiful.
We're here to help you.
Deschutes County is the heart of Oregon.
Everyone wants to be here.
This is episode 14 of the Inside Deschutes County podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Eric Brion. We really appreciate the heck out of you for listening to our show. It's hard to believe. We are almost to Thanksgiving. And you know what? I am thankful for each of you who've taken some time and listened to our show. It's where we try to get you up to speed on things happening around the county and introduce you to some great people who work here and how they impact our community. Today, our guest, Senior Planner from Community Development, Tanya Saltzman is here. Tanya, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Can you believe Thanksgiving is almost here?
Yes and no. All of a sudden I realized that it's in a week and I haven't done anything. It seems
early this year, right?
But I guess that happens, right?
That happens, the calendar, all that kind of stuff. Do you have any Turkey Day traditions? What goes on in the Saltzman household?
Well, my father is flying in. He lives in France. So
that's big.
he's living his best life over in Paris as a retired airline pilot. So he's flying in today, actually. And we will be celebrating with him, which is our tradition.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any food traditions?
Just a lot of it.
Just a lot.
I mean, we have a small Thanksgiving. I have a very small family. Most of them are back on the East Coast. But we love to cook and we love to eat. So we have a spicy Jamaican carrot soup that's always a hit. It's a food and wine recipe. Just shout out to Food and Wine. It's
nice.
Yeah.
They'll be our sponsor later.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, and this question sparks a lot of debate. Do you cranberry sauce? What's the
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Yay or nay?
And not canned. So
Not
the
canned.
kind that you cook from fresh cranberries, real simple.
Sauce.
And a bunch of sugar and a little bit of orange just simmered on the stove.
Okay.
And yeah, that's my
Yams?
I like a sweet potato yam, but this year I don't know if we're going to do that because we don't have enough people. We might just go with regular potatoes.
Okay.
I haven't thought it through enough yet.
I know.
This is
it's
good
come out
preparation,
so fast,
so thank
right?
you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. That's what we're here for. We're here to talk about Thanksgiving prep.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much with Thanksgiving. It's early this year. There's Thanksgiving, but you've got a lot on, speaking of big plates, you've got a lot on your plate when it comes to work. Community development, first of all, for people who don't know what that is, the Community Development Department, referred to as CDD, what is it? Because a lot of people, I don't know if everybody knows.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So CDD encompasses a bunch of departments. So I'm in the planning division. And within planning, we have current planning and long-range planning. I'm in the long-range planning division, and I guess we'll talk about this in a minute, but we do sort of larger projects about changing the zoning code, sort of big policy changes, or maybe there's a state law that we have to implement. Current planning, they deal with, that's who you see if you're going in for a permit, a land use permit, and you want to do something with your property, and you're asking someone, to look at that and review your property. And then they, in turn, work with the building safety division, on-site wastewater, so septic, all of our fantastic permit tech department. They just kind of shepherd people through the entire process of getting stuff built, whether that's an electrical permit or a land use permit or big, if you're a destination resort, all of that stuff falls into the umbrella of community development.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, and code compliance as well.
Oh, so do you enforce?
Our
that's
code
probably
compliance, that's
tricky.
It is. It's right now, and I'm not an expert on code compliance, but it is complaint based, and it has been for a while. We don't have people kind of driving around looking for for stuff that's not. And even though I know some people would like us to do that, we just don't have the resources. But
You're
it is
not out in your car
No,
just kind
I
of
mean,
going.
no. I mean, unless there's something really, really egregious that's like a serious safety issue. But in general, it's complaint-based, so people reach out to us. They say, oh, I saw this thing that looks illegal or whatever that is, and then our code compliance department works on that.
How in the world did you get into this? We were talking before we started. You have kind of a journalism
Yeah.
print background. How did you get into code and rules?
It's a really good
and
question.
Senate bills
Yeah.
and county commissioners and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Because you're in the middle of all of that.
Yes. Yeah. We're in kind of the middle of, state and local legislation, politics and land use and environmental stuff. And it's kind of a little bit of everything, which is, I think, why I like it. I kind of fell into planning very randomly. I worked first in journalism and publishing when I lived back in New York City, which is where I'm from, and kind of got burnt out. Did work for Food and Wine magazine. I will point that out. So that's why I'm giving them the
Food
shout
and
out.
Wine. Okay.
But then I decided I really loved kind of urban studies and cities and the history of cities and why they are the way they are, especially in a city like New York, which just has such an amazing history and layout. And so I went to grad school for that. I just did a 180, and I didn't even know urban planning was a thing that existed because this was quite some time ago. And then I just sort of fell into that type of work. I worked as a consultant back in New York. I worked for a giant university, the City University of New York, which is kind of the main public university in the city, doing a little bit more like facilities planning. So a little bit more on construction and design and planning for, there's going to be a new science building. How many labs do we need? That type of stuff. So a lot of space planning.
Okay.
And then I ended up here.
Here you are.
Here I am.
Bend, Oregon.
Yeah.
So Dad's coming in,
Yes.
flying in.
Yep. As we speak.
And so when you get around the dinner table and he asks you the question, hey, how's work? What's going on? What's your answer?
My answer is that it's always very busy. Well, first I ask him how airplanes fly because it was his career, and I still don't understand.
Oh, that's cool.
I understand intellectually, but always a question. I always have to ask him some airplane questions. But no, it's good. I mean, community development's always really busy. We have our kind of fingers in a lot of things. I work on very narrow things, but my colleagues they're just really great, and they're really good at what they do, whether they're, in the code compliance or current planning. And a lot of people, I think, in the community have interacted with a lot of our folks.
Just a little bit.
Just a little.
Just a little.
And we hope those experiences are good. But we have a few big long-range projects that we're working on that is taking up much of my time.
So what project are you going to tell your dad about over the dinner table?
Gosh, I try not to talk about work with him, but
Yeah, you probably try to draw that line.
I try to draw the line, but I'll probably talk about the current thing that I'm working on, which is about RVs as rental dwellings.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that topic because that was my segue to ask you about that. That's probably the biggest thing going on right now, right? I mean, between that and rural ADUs,
Yes.
RV rental dwellings is kind of your area, right? Can you walk us through this process, how it came into being, and why we're involved in it now?
Yeah, absolutely. So RVs as rental dwellings, this is basically comes from a Senate Bill 1013 that was passed at the state level in, I believe it was July of this year. So this is now our local process to kind of potentially turn that state law into local code. What it does is allows property owners in certain zones, rural residential, it's very hard to say, to allow an RV to be parked on their property subject to a whole bunch of conditions that I'm happy to talk about, and someone can live in it. So providing it as essentially a permanent rental dwelling, the same way you would rent out your house or a room in your house or that type of thing. We have a lot of ways that you can live temporarily in RVs in the county, whether that's for medical hardship or while your house is being built and it's on a vacant lot. But this is something that will specifically allow people to live in RVs on properties in unincorporated areas of the county. The rules are very different in cities. and I can't really speak to those, but this is a big change in the rural county. Similar to how accessory dwelling units, that process was just completed at the county level. That's also a new type of housing, basically, that's going to be allowed in the rural county.
So is this an effort? This could be a couple of things, right? So it could help with maybe the houseless issue in Deschutes County. It could also be income for people.
Yep.
So what is that could probably be a little tricky too, because you're trying to navigate some of those things, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's something that we're kind of turning around in our collective heads. Who this will help. The way the rules work at the state level right now is a property owner has to live in their primary dwelling, so in their main house. It has to be owner occupied, so they're there, and they have to provide some improvements to their property to allow for these RVs. So they're basically building a mini RV park, although on a very, very small scale. So they have to provide wastewater disposal and electric and drainage and things like that, and essentially what we're envisioning is like a pedestal, the same way it would be in an RV park, but it's at someone's home. So that incurs some cost. You can't just drive up an RV and then live in it. There's definitely some infrastructure that has to be built in. And then in theory, that property owner charges rent to someone who lives in the RV. So I don't know if that will necessarily address the homeless population because it does involve some rent. I don't know. It's possible it could. Or it could help with the total opposite end of the spectrum. People and someone was just speaking to me about this, snowbirds, someone who just wants to live in their really fancy RV, assuming it meets all the criteria, just for the summer or the winter or what, I guess not the winter if there's snowbirds. But, just a seasonal thing and they want to live at their, I don't know, it's maybe a family member's house or something like that. So there's a lot of scenarios and we're not completely sure who might be interested, and that's what the public process is about a lot.
Yeah, it's really hard, right? Because everybody can find a reason not to do something.
Yes.
And good reasons to do something, which you've laid out a few of those. How do you navigate some of because I'm imagining I own an RV, so I'm imagining they need, 30 amp or 50 amp or, place for gray water,
Exactly.
place for black water, maybe some trash requirements too. I don't know. I mean, because you're developing or creating more. So, boy, I mean, putting all those things into place. Everybody's RV is different too,
Exactly.
and the nuances. So how do you navigate all these?
That's a very good question. I mean, as
You're
far
like,
as
I
all
haven't, Eric. I have no idea.
we're working on it.
We're getting there, buddy.
Yeah. As far as kind of the electric and that stuff, I mean, that's all through our regular permitting process. So you have to get electrical permits. You have to get an inspection from our on-site wastewater people. So those would have to be to the specs that are required. I don't dive into that nitty-gritty necessarily, but, that'll have to be to code, and we have to make sure that people will dispose of their wastewater correctly. We don't, we know there's people living illegally in RVs all over the county who are just dumping their wastewater wherever, or not using, or maybe their RV doesn't have those facilities. So, the idea is to have this a legal way to do this. That's to code. That's not going to damage the environment around it. So yeah, that's how we're starting to navigate it, by putting in these. Some of it is required by the state. These requirements. We're looking at other requirements. There might be issues of compatibility. We've heard so far some people don't want to see this next door to them. So maybe we might have some sort of setback. So it has to be a certain distance from the property line or things like that. So we're kind of, our doors are open right now to people, voicing their concerns to say, oh my gosh, I really hate this because reasons, or I love this so much because it'll provide me additional income. And, so we're an open book right now, and we're trying to figure this out.
And there's ways for people to get involved and give their opinions about this, right? Where are we at in that process?
So we just had our first public hearing with the Planning Commission last Thursday, which was November 9th. And that is going to be continued on to December 14th. That's also a Thursday. Those are held in the evenings. And this is all in front of the Planning Commission, which is sort of the first wave of hearings in the legislative process at the county. Once the Planning Commission receives all the testimony and deliberates, and they make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, and then there's a whole nother hearing process with the board. So people can participate in one or both of those hearings, either with the Planning Commission or the board or both. They can write to me, and I can provide you, obviously, my contact information, and we put people's emails into the public record. They're available on the web, so that becomes part of the record that the Planning Commission or the board reads and considers when they're looking at deciding what to do. People can also come to the public hearing, either virtually or in person, and say what they think. So there's lots of ways to be involved still.
The website Deschutes.org/RV amendments.
That's correct.
Is where you can read up on this and find out the ways to participate. I want to make sure I snuck that in there.
Thank you.
And we'll sneak it in again at the end. But what are some of the biggest things that people are concerned about? You said people living next door. Is it blight? Is that kind of what a lot of the concern, or is the concern about, maybe restrictions? Does it have to be a certain type RV? Does it have to be certain years?
Right.
Sometimes you can go to an RV park and you can't park it for long term at an RV park if it's 25 years old.
Right.
So things along those lines. Do you have what are you hearing in terms of what's keeping, I guess, sparking the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, so far, and we've had about a dozen people speak at the public hearing, and then probably another dozen write in, maybe a little less than that. I think people cited property values going down as a reason to oppose, and I assume, just extending that thought, I assume that just means issues of compatibility and visual, it's affecting the rural character in people's opinions, I think, by seeing these RVs. We don't have restrictions on how old it can be, although it does have to meet the definition of RV in the statute. The state statute includes some fire certification standards, so it has to meet those or be self-certified. So there are some kind of checks and balances to what you could have there. Some people conversely thought that this would be a help to their property values because they're providing, they're creating improvements. They have to create this RV pad. We want to have a surface where they can, it's gravel or concrete or asphalt, I believe. So you can't just kind of park it in the woods. You want to make sure it's stable. And this pedestal with all the services, you are making improvements to your property, so that could potentially increase the value.
Yeah, a lot of people in this area have RVs.
Right.
So maybe this, just provides more opportunity, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, it does provide the opportunity to be a landlord if you want to do that. It is a little bit of investment to get that infrastructure up and running and permitted, but it does have potential to provide income. Or, in the process for the rural ADUs, we had a lot of people saying, I want a place for my recent college graduate kid to live while they're figuring stuff out. They can't afford to buy a house. This might be a good interim. So family members, I think, would be an interesting audience for this, that people might be interested in providing this opportunity for them.
So there's a lot of different kinds of RVs. I know we talked about years and, kind of what the RV looks like and what it has available. But there's a pickup camper, there's a motorhome, there's a trailer, there's does a pop-up camper qualify? All of those. Is it anything and everything? No, and this is something that we have struggled with a decent amount because there's so many different definitions floating out there, and they all kind of reference each other. Adventure vans and all of those things too.
Yeah, the way it has to be, I believe, titled or licensed by the Department of Transportation, or it can be a park model, and these are defined in statute. And usually that has to do with the size and the fact that it is mobile. It's not rendered immobile, so you can't have it up on blocks with the wheels off. It has to be able to drive away if you have to. Obviously, it's connected to stuff, but and it has to have, one of the things that we're considering requiring, and this is not necessarily in the definition of an RV, and I'm getting a little bit in the weeds, but for the purposes of this code amendment, we are playing with the idea of requiring the RV to have a toilet and a sink in it. So in other words, a
wondering about that.
van, just a regular van, would probably would not count. Even though it might be titled or licensed as an RV, as far as the state goes, we want to have this additional requirement. And that came from a bunch of people in our own staff saying that if the purpose of this legislation is to provide housing for people, for dwellings, for people who might not be able to, you want them to have a proper dwelling. You don't want them to have to go pee in the woods,
Right.
basically.
Right.
You want them to have, reasonable sanitary services and amenities so that they can conduct their lives as people want to conduct their lives and become a productive
So many
member of society.
nuances.
Yeah, there's a million nuances.
So many new. I mean, because you've got the portable, the cartridges you can basically take and dispose of too, and so those, it's just so many different things.
Yeah.
And this is kind of going on parallel to the conversation about rural ADUs. I know this is not totally in your wheelhouse, but I know that you've been involved in that.
Yeah.
Are there any similarities kind of with the RV rental dwellings and the rural ADUs? Because I believe people can start applying for permits December 1st, I think.
That's correct. Yeah. So rural ADUs has been in the hopper for a while. That legislation was passed at the state level a couple years ago. And so it just finally completed the process here locally in Deschutes County. And like you said, applications are going to be accepted starting in December 1st. And we already have a ton of people inquiring. There are definitely some similarities. I think the purpose of both is to provide another type of housing, some alternative to a big single-family dwelling. We know that it's really hard to find housing here in Central Oregon, whether that's renting or buying. So both of these are meant to provide a slightly different kind of housing. Maybe it's a little smaller. Maybe it's not as fancy. Or, we have a ton of people who work at all of our fabulous businesses here and they need places to live. They might not be able to buy the expensive house that's in Bend. So these are just meant to provide alternatives to the traditional single-family home. So that's the biggest similarity. One of the main differences, obviously an ADU is a permanent dwelling that you have to build and get building permits and all of that. So that's a little bit more complicated. RVs are complicated, as we just discussed, in a different way because, what is an RV? What's the plumbing situation? That takes so many shapes and sizes. With ADUs, there's a minimum lot size that's baked into the state law, and that is not baked into the state law for RVs.
We'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So
the state law for ADUs was a 2-acre minimum, and this is all in rural residential areas. So not EFU, which is farm, and not the forest zones either. The Oregon state land use system keeps those really kind of tightly regulated, the farm and forest, because that's kind of the heart and soul of the Oregon land use system, essentially. So for ADUs, the state requirement was 2 acres or more. The way ultimately our regulations locally shook out was it was 2 acres in everywhere except for certain areas of South County that have groundwater issues already. People who try to get kind of their septics improved down there, they know that it's a different situation there. The groundwater is more compromised, and the water table is higher. So they have to have a 5-acre minimum. So you have to have a lot more space to have an ADU there.
I imagine not everybody completely happy about the 2 versus 5, and like, hey, why South County? Why are you picking on South County?
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I mean, there's been, and our wastewater manager Todd Cleveland, he could speak to you better than I can, but it's a different situation down there in terms of water quality and the danger of I believe it's nitrate loading. Just because of the geology of South County. And there's a designated area. There's been studies that show this kind of compromised area. So that was the reason behind it. It just can't support that density of that many more septics and that much more water kind of going into the system down there. So it's based on a bunch of studies, and that's how those lines were drawn. But people were not necessarily super psyched about it, but some people are.
Well, you did your homework on it. It's not like you just randomly said, "Hey, right here we're going to just do 5, and
this
here
is
over 2."
A very well thought out, calculated, based on scientific evidence and people who know things about wastewater could speak better to it than I can. But yeah.
What about people who, and maybe you have this answer, maybe you don't, but if maybe they own 1.7 acres of land and they want to do this, is there an application
really.
process? Like, can they appeal? Can you work with them? What's the what?
I would
the
have to
process
defer
there?
that to my current planning colleagues. But in general, 2 acres is 2 acres.
2 acres is 2 acres.
You know, there's it's just based on how much that soil can absorb things. So, you know, there has to be a line and it has to be kind of enforced. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the rules.
It's tough. Yeah. I
That's
mean,
the
it's
rules.
unfortunate if you're at 1.99. But
Yeah,
yeah.
that would be a bummer.
Yeah. So the difference is with RVs that there is no minimum baked into the state law. We are toying with a 1 acre minimum throughout the county. This is just our first blush. We don't know where that's going to land, but that's what our first draft is at. And we received some support on that in our public hearings so far. So
when you got into this job, I'm here with Tanya Saltzman, Senior Planner with Community Development. When you got into this job, I imagine you weren't thinking that they were going to be maybe as controversial as some of these are. So how do you deal with the controversy of some of these things, or do you just give them the answers and that's the answer?
well, you know, yeah, I did not realize that things would be so controversial. You know, we have a really sophisticated populace here, and people really, and I love that. I mean, I want people to be involved, and people are involved, and that's what we want. And you know, people pay attention. We are not lacking.
Which is good.
Yes, 100%.
Engaged.
They're
community.
very engaged. I think there's a lot of rural counties where there's just not that energy. It's also maybe a smaller population, but you know, we're really fortunate to have people who pay attention to this stuff because it's important. You know, my job, is to facilitate a good process. So I'm kind of the neutral person in this, just making this procedure happen. You know, I have my own opinions about some of this stuff. That's not my job to voice them necessarily. I just want to make sure that the people are heard, that they get their voices heard, that the Planning Commission and the board listens to them and takes, you know, their thoughts into consideration, and that, you know, we affect a good process. And that's kind of our job as planners, to make sure that runs smoothly and people feel listened to, and that the board and the Planning Commission have the information they need to make a decision.
And that process is in place.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Well, so any big, besides RVs, besides rural ADUs, are there any big projects that maybe you can peel back the curtain a little bit that you might be working on in the horizon?
Well,
turn into the new year, you know.
Yeah.
What controversy's coming our way,
gosh.
Tanya? Come
No,
on.
well,
Inquiring minds.
well, we are wrapping up. Well, not wrapping up, but on the sort of sunset of our comprehensive plan. And I think you maybe have already spoken to Nicole Mardell, our other senior planner.
Not yet, but she's
not
on.
yet?
She's
Okay.
on my list.
I will tell her to call you.
Yeah.
But the comprehensive plan is a huge. It's
Deschutes 2040.
Exactly. So that's a huge project. It recently had planning commission hearings, so it's in sort of a similar place time-wise as RVs, but I imagine it'll take a little longer because it's so huge. Just talks about goals and policies for the entire rural county, having to do with everything. You know, whether it's historic resources or wildlife or transportation, it's all the stuff in one big document. So that's a biggie.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. Nicole's doing a great job. It's a lot of public outreach. Hopefully people have heard us, you know, with having open houses and meetings and websites and all of that stuff. That's like...
They've even had open houses in barns.
Oh, yeah. They are...
I mean, they'll do them anywhere.
They will come to you. I think that might be over now, but maybe if you ask nicely, you could get another open house.
See what we can do about
Yeah,
that.
I
We
mean,
know
they went out
people.
to Brothers. You know, they really want everybody, not just kind of, we have a core group of regulars who are engaged, who are fabulous, but we want to, for something like a comprehensive plan, just really touch all corners of the county.
What else do you want people to know about your job, your team, the work you do that maybe they don't know? What would you tell Dad at the dinner table?
More wine, please. That's what I would say. No, it's, you know, I know that people don't, it can be frustrating for people walking into the counter who want to just do what they want to do with their property, and I totally get it. I think we exist not to be a barrier, whether it's the building department or us, or, we're trying to facilitate to help people get to their goals. It's not always easy. Sometimes people's goals don't align with the law, and we have to do that. But I know that, especially my colleagues in current planning, they work really hard they know people in the county. People have relationships at this point, and they just really work hard to facilitate, people getting what they want to get done within the confines of, the laws and the rules that we have. So it's not always easy.
And county versus city versus,
Yeah.
That's probably a big thing you have to explain a lot, probably,
Yes.
too, right?
Yeah, we got some people who are in the city of Bend, for instance, and they have their own zoning code, their own community development department, different set of rules. So sometimes we have to redirect people that way.
Complicated stuff, Tanya.
Yeah,
All
it is.
things you will not talk about at Thanksgiving dinner with Dad and the Jamaican soup.
Jamaican spicy carrot soup.
What is in that?
It's very easy. Carrots and onions mostly, and then a Scotch bonnet pepper, some thyme, some chicken broth, and then you puree it all. It's delicious.
So if you want the recipe,
it's on foodandwine.com.
or reach out directly to Tanya
call me.
Saltzman at
We can
Deschutes
talk about
County Community
sewers
Development.
or soup. It's
Sewers,
fine.
RVs,
I'm there
whatever.
for whatever people need.
You've got it all. Tanya Saltzman, Senior Planner with Community Development. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Well, lots of good information on this podcast. Lots to digest. We even digested some food information on this podcast. We are pro cranberry, I guess. If you have questions about the Community Development Department, you can go to Deschutes.org/CDD. Or if you have specific questions about the RV rental dwellings, you can go to Deschutes.org/RV amendments. December 14th, next hearing on RVs. December 1st is when you can start applying for the rural ADUs. So keep those dates in mind. If you have a question about this podcast or ideas for future podcasts, you can email us at info@Deschutes.org. And remember to subscribe to the Inside Deschutes County podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. Drop us a review, drop us a rating. Really appreciate it. But until next time, be safe out there and happy Thanksgiving.